Here at Blade HQ, we carry knives from all over the world, and we love them, but we have a special place in our hearts for knives made by the home team right here in the United States of America. And in the spirit of American independence this July, we're going to talk about 3 of our favorite knives from 5 of our favorite USA-made brands. Let's talk knives. If there's a comment that returns a lot to our comment section, it is, I want USA made. And today we have an entire table full of them. And if you're looking to buy a USA made knife, any of the knives on this table I would trust my life to. In fact, I own many of them. So we'll start it off with Benchmade. Benchmade is one of our favorite brands here because not only do they make great knives, but they make them in the United States of America, and they are backed by a game-changing warranty, making them truly yours for life, as Benchmade says. This here is the Benchmade 940, one of the most popular models they've ever made. This one came out in the late 90s, designed by Warren Osborne, and he made this as sort of a ranch knife, something to do with all your ranch tasks, scraping out hooves, cutting fences, that sort of thing. And he designed this thing with all the craziness ready for it. So we got a nice, solid aluminum handle, so it's gonna be strong enough to handle whatever abuse you're giving it. This purple backspacer for extra fun and visibility. S30V blade with a very nice reverse Tonto Spey clip point blade. It's a fun knife, and it has been a bestseller for coming up on 30 years. So, very nice work, Benchmade. We hope to see the 940 for many years to come. Next up, we have the Bug Out. Benchmade Bug Out is one of the best-selling knives of all time. It is so light. This one weighs less than 2 ounces. This one has the CF Elite handle, nice and stiff. CPM S30V blade, super light, super fidgety, just a nice, usable design. People love these things, and I can see why. One of my favorite parts of the Bug Out is its thriving aftermarket. You can get different scales, thumb studs, all kinds of crazy stuff to make your Bug Out uniquely yours. And lastly, on the Benchmade front, we have the Griptilian. And I really do like the Griptilian. It's a Melpardue design, and this one has the FRN handle with a very aggressive knurling texture here, so it grips the hand really nicely. A nice high-ride pocket clip, and the axis lock. Now, one thing to note of Benchmade is while their folders have really made that company into what it is, they did not get their start there. The reason Benchmade's logo is a butterfly is because Les Diasis, the founder of Benchmade, really liked ballad songs, and he's half Filipino, and he wanted to get in contact with his Filipino heritage, but he also wanted a ballad song that was good for self-defense and rugged enough to be carried every single day and really hold up to it. And that's where the Yours for Life motto came from. And every single knife that Benchmade has made, whether it's a butterfly knife or just a folder or a fixed blade or a hunting knife or whatever craziness Benchmade's coming up with next, they mean it. That is yours for life. Everything's made in the USA, and everything is backed by an incredible warranty. And whatever you do to your knife, if you send it back to Benchmade, they're gonna help you get that knife in tip-top shape and make sure that the only thing you have to worry about is who you're gonna pass it down to. Another one of our top brands is Spyderco. Spyderco does have some overseas stuff, but their USA-made stuff is where their bread and butter lies. This here is the Paramilitary 2. And I grabbed this one for a few reasons. So Sal Glesser and his wife Gail started Spyderco in the 80s. And they started out of a van going around the country selling things like the portable hand, like a car mirror accessory, and eventually the triangle sharp maker. And then they settled down in Golden, Colorado, and they started making knives. Now, at some point along the line, Sal was asked, if you were sending your son to war, what knife would you send him with? And he said, I don't know. I think I'd have to design it. And he designed the military. Then the Paramilitary came out as a collaboration between him and his son. So here we have the Sal Glesser design, and over here is the Eric Glesser design. Eric is currently at the helm of Spyderco, and the Paramilitary 2 is the collaboration between those two. And you can see the passion and expertise that goes into this knife. This is one of the best everyday carry knives ever made. In fact, it was voted a few years ago as one of the knives that everybody should have, and I wholeheartedly agree. It's made so well right here in the United States of America with that so conveniently operated compression lock mechanism that Spyderco invented. That knife eventually got made miniaturized in the Para 3. Here we have one in the Maximate blade steel as well. That's another thing we love about Spyderco, is they're not afraid to cook in crazy steels. I thought for the longest time that Maximate was a Spyderco exclusive. It is not. You can just buy Maximate bar stock, but most companies don't because Maximate is really hard to work with. Its carbide volume is so high and its wear resistance is so high. It makes such a good knife. It'll never go dull pretty much. Some of the highest edge retention you can get, but you're signing yourself up for a workout if you want to grind that stuff. And only Spyderco makes this stuff in production models. I've seen a few others like in really limited runs, but this knife has been in production for many, many years. And then same compression lock as the Para Military 2, G10 handle, made in the USA. Very well done, Spyderco. Now, as for that Eric Glesser guy, one of his first designs was the Manix. He was in his mid-20s when he designed this thing. And this one is the Manix 2, which moved from the lock back of the original Manix to the ball bearing lock, which wedges a ball bearing between this full spacer back here and the tang of the blade. A nice solid lock that's very smooth and easy to operate. This is a hard using knife for the ages. The Manix has been around almost as long as any of these others. I think it's been around longer than any of the other two here, but it is still incredibly popular because it's just that good of a knife. That's something I love about Spyderco is they have experts making knives there. People who care, they love knives, they want to be there, and they want to make the best knife possible. Another brand that is like that has been in it for the best knives possible for the whole time is Microtech. So a long time ago in the 90s, Tony Marfione was a young man who was living in an apartment in Vero Beach, Florida, the other oceany state. And his job was a machinist. He just machined things for some company. And he thought, you know, I'll bet I could make a pretty cool automatic knife. And in his apartment, he set up a machine and a grinder and everything, and he started making knives. And ever since then, it has always been, I go to the shop every single day with the motivation of making the best knife possible. And I think no knife is more evident for that than the Ultratech. This one came out in the later 90s after Microtech had really been established. And it still is as popular today, if not more so than it ever has been before. Also, I don't know of any knife that has been available in more variants than this. In blade shape, blade sharp, blade edge type, blade grinds, custom variants, different colors of handle, different finishes on the blade, different handle textures, different pocket clips, etc., etc., etc. There are over 700 variants of the Ultratech. So whatever you can dream, I can assure you there's an Ultratech that fits it. Very fun indeed. This thing was and still is the gold standard of everyday carry, crossover, tactical, out the front knives. And Microtech did a really good job with them. Now, Microtech also remembers all of you guys out in the field, military, police, people who need a true combat knife. And that's where the Combat Troodon comes in. This is another one of their most popular ones because this thing is big. A really big knife. I can fit a full hand and almost a second hand on it, but then it still has a nice, easy to actuate mechanism. This one also comes in a bunch of different flavors. My personal favorite is the Hellhound blade. This one's just a drop point, but the Combat Troodon is very well built. And the thing is just 40 years ago, people always thought, yes, those fancy out the fronts, they're cool, but are they practical? Probably not. But Tony Marfione showed up and he proved that these things are worthy of a war zone if they are made right. And he's been making them right ever since. But his expertise does not just extend to autos. Just last year, 2023, the MSI was announced, and this one came with the ram lock mechanism, which looks kind of like the crossbar lock that we've seen a lot, but this one's extra special because it is, instead of a bar, it's a block that rides on a track with a spring behind it. And that makes it really smooth. It doesn't turn in your hand as you run it. Gives you a nice big place to put your thumb, so if you're in gloves, it's gonna be easy to operate. And then instead of having to force a bar through your liners, you have to force a block now if you want that lock to fail. They did a really good job with this one. And not only that, it's just super fidgety too. It's the right price too. These ones go for like $190, I wanna say. Not bad at all from Microtech. USA made of quality materials with great passion for the product. Now, the passion for the product that we find from ProTech was born very young. So Dave Wattenberg of ProTech was born and raised in Southern California, where Ross Cutlery, owned by his family, was the family business, and he would work there, and he'd work the grinders, and he'd do all kinds of crazy stuff to help people sharpen. And every chef, every barber who needed sharpening in greater Los Angeles would come to Ross Cutlery and drop off their knives for service. And that passion for knives carried with him all the way into adulthood. And as a teacher in Colorado, he still couldn't escape, and he ran a sort of side hustle called the Finer Points, where he would take custom knives and go to shows and deal in them. And then eventually he started making his own, and ProTech was born. And ProTech has been around ever since. The first ProTech knife was the Runt, and the Runt, as it was originally made, is no longer, but the Runt 5 is still alive and well. And this one is for their 25-year anniversary. So this one has the 5 V's on the spine, as well as this Nexus pattern that you find on the ProTech boxes. It's a lot of fun, MagnaCut blade, and one of the snappiest autos ever, because Dave from ProTech has a way of working with people and finding the best spring manufacturers so that he can make the hardest and most consistently hitting autos out there. And he did a really good job with that. Along the way, the Tactical Response series was born. This one turns 26 years old this year. This is the TR3. The TR3 is the most popular of the TR line, Tactical Response, I think, because of just how simple and clean its design is. It feels like an everyday carry folder, has a nice conventional drop point, a nice usable handle with a nice almost guard in there, I guess you could say. Just a great knife to carry and use, but then still hits and fires just like a ProTech ought to. Now, their expertise does not just extend to autos. Recently, their manual game was seriously upgraded by this little guy right here. This is the Malibu. And the Malibu has a button lock action on a flipper that they tuned in just the right way. Now, a button lock flipper seems like a fairly simple thing to do, but finding a way to put a ramp on the button to interface with the blade, but also lock up on the other side is not easily done. On an auto, it's a little bit less difficult, but on a manual like this, it takes some skills, and it took iteration, years of design work, and eventually the Malibu was born, and it is not the only button lock manual they have now. We also have the Mordax, and this year, TR3 is getting the manual treatment. Can you imagine having that one's gonna have a thumb stud action, manual on a TR3? Ooh, that sounds really good. ProTech, killing it. Love what ProTech does, and I love to see family businesses that were born as children, pretty much. When Dave was just a kid, he was getting his start in knives. And if you want to talk about just a kid getting started in knives, Buck Knives is where it is at for me in that one. So Hoyt Buck was a 13-year-old blacksmith's apprentice in Kansas, and he was contributing to his family's income in the very early 1900s by making knives out of old files. Now, the first knife that he made has been lost to history, but today the Buck 119 is largely the same design. It hardly is different. In fact, I'm willing to bet if you handed this to Hoyt Buck, he would say, yep, I made that. Now, you can almost see in its blade pattern here a file. Like, you almost see, yeah, you can see where teeth would be there, but now they're making it out of a 420 steel with a beautiful Boss heat treat, giving you some of the highest performance 420 out there. This one comes with a nice polymer handle, and then on the bolsters and on the front, we have little lines here, and those are actually micarta. So some of the first knives to feature micarta were those little bolster additives, stacking pieces that you found on these Buck knives. This thing is still a great hunting and general utility knife. It's got a nice guard, it's smooth in the hand, it's not gonna chew up your hand or anything, has a nice leather sheath that comes with it, but this thing hasn't hardly changed in almost 100 years. In my opinion, the greatest knives are the ones that stand the test of time. The ones where a design comes out and it stays remarkably the same for decades, if not longer, and that is where Buck is the king of the hill. Nowhere is that more evident than on the Buck 110. This particular one is a lot like the original with the brass bolsters, except instead of an ebony handle scale, we have green micarta and a CPM S45 VN blade. But this is a Buck 110. In fact, I carried my Buck 110, which really is pretty much the original. This one has the ebony handle and the 420 blade, and this one I actually got signed by CJ Buck. So CJ Buck did not start Buck. CJ was raised in the knife industry by his father, Chuck Buck, who was raised in it by his father, Al Buck, who was raised in it by his father, Hoyt Buck. So we have 4 generations of passionate bladesmithing right up in Idaho right now, and even as we speak, they are grinding out more and more Buck 110s to fill your pockets with. Now, one sad day in history, there was a fight on board the USS Ranger in the Navy, And apparently, allegedly, a couple of Buck 110s wanted to join the fight, and somebody ended up very injured. And the Navy established no blades over 4 inches on the ships. And that was a lot of where Buck was selling their 110s. And so the 112 was born. Now this one's the auto variant that came out more recently, but the Buck 112 is, for all intents and purposes, a mini 110. It doesn't have a 4-inch blade, it has a 3-inch blade, and it is compliant for the rules that were established on the USS Ranger. Hence the name of this knife, the Buck 112 Ranger, which I think is one of the funniest and most classic stories out there. And then the auto version was because a lot of people were modifying the 110 and 112 to be automatic, and then Buck's like, you know what? We'll do that for you as well. So my favorite thing about America is here, it is the land of opportunity. People can show up and make whatever they want, but if it's gonna stand the test of time, people actually have to buy it, and that leads to competition and innovation and creating better and better products. And companies like Buck and like ProTech and Microtech and Spyderco and Benchmade have all been consistently innovating and making good products for you and me, right here in America. And the best thing about USA made products that you just don't get anywhere else is the warranty service. Because say I have a knife that's made in, I don't know, the Czech Republic. It's a great knife. I might damage it or something. If I want to send that into the factory for sharpening or for a new handle scale or whatever, I have to ship it to the Czech Republic. Who's to say it'll even make it there? But in the United States, I mean, I think the furthest company from me on the table right now is Microtech. I just have to ship something to North Carolina. I have insured carrier packaging, everything. It'll be back to me in no time, and it'll be fixed by the same passionate knife makers who made it. And I just love USA made knives, and I love this country and the fact that we can carry all these knives in this country. So if you are in the market for a USA made knife, I strongly invite you to consider these 5 brands as well as the many, many other USA made knife brands we have at Blade HQ. You'll find them all at our website, and make sure that you're part of Blade Club when you get them, because you'll actually get points to help you with your next knife purchases as well. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time. I had a thought and then it flew away. All right, let's try this again. It's nice. Plastic. I forget exactly what the word is. Plastic. It's... Wait, is it not ball for this? It's the same stuff bowling balls are made out of. I don't remember. Okay.
Like